Crucifixion was a Roman form of capital punishment used only for slaves and criminals of the lowest order. It was a common method of execution, and secular history records hundreds being crucified at once. Research has indicated that there were several different objects on which a person could be crucified. The first one we'll look at was a tree. The victim was simply backed up to a standing tree and nailed on it in whatever shape the branches flowed. Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, records the Roman soldiers entertaining themselves by crucifying captives in unusual positions. Another form of crucifixion involved a simple post driven in the ground. Hands were stretched out and nailed over the head. Not as common but still used was the X-shaped, basically two logs placed in the ground at angles. The body was splayed out with hands and feet fixed at the four corners. The T-shaped form of crucifixion was probably the most common next to the tree. A crossbar was mounted on top of a post, and the arms were stretched out across the top of the T. Now, the last form of crucifixion that we'll look at was usually reserved for criminals of some notoriety. A certificate disclosing one's crime would be tacked to the topmost portion of the cross. This was the type of cross on which Jesus was crucified. The victim was usually stretched out naked. Hands and feet were held in place by nails driven through the wrists and the ankle bones. 1,000 years before this time, God had instructed King David to write a complete psalm about the way Jesus would die. In it, David records God as saying,
"They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. People stare and gloat over me."
This was written long before the Romans came to power, and about 800 years before the Romans adopted crucifixion as one of their official forms of capital punishment. To this day, crucifixion is considered to be the most brutal form of execution. Death is slow. Sometimes it took days. Ultimately, one died of asphyxiation. Hanging on outstretched arms, the pressure on the diaphragm made it impossible to breathe. One could only inhale by lifting oneself up, by pulling on the arms and pushing with the feet to allow room for the diaphragm to work. And of course, all this pulling and pushing was done against the excruciating restraint of the nails. Death came when exhaustion and shock left one unable to lift the body.